What happens when Hollywood royalty walks into a talk show expecting a friendly chat, only to face a host who thinks she can tear down a beloved icon? What we witnessed on The View was nothing short of spectacular, a masterclass in how quickly the tables can turn when someone underestimates their guest. Joy Behar thought she had Robert Downey Jr. right where she wanted him, lined up for what she clearly planned as an ambush interview. But what she got instead was a response so perfectly crafted, so devastatingly clever, that it left her speechless and the audience stunned. This is the story of how one of the most respected actors in Hollywood delivered a comeback so brutal that it will be talked about for years to come. Before we dive into this incredible moment, make sure you hit that subscribe button and let me know in the comments what you think about celebrities standing up for themselves in interviews like this. Now, let's get into what really happened when Robert Downey Jr. stepped onto the View stage that morning. The atmosphere in the studio was electric as Robert Downey Jr. made his entrance. The audience erupted in applause, clearly thrilled to see Iron Man himself in person. He waved graciously, that trademark smile lighting up his face as he made his way to the guest chair. The other co-hosts, Whoopi Goldberg, Sarah Haynes, and Alyssa Farah Griffin, all seemed genuinely excited to have him there. But there was something different about Joy Behar's demeanor. While the others were warm and welcoming, Joy sat with a slight smirk, her eyes narrowing as she watched him settle into his seat. "Well, well, well," Joy began as the applause died down. "Look who decided to grace us with his presence. Robert Downey Jr., the man who thinks he can do no wrong." The studio fell into an uncomfortable silence. This wasn't the usual friendly banter that guests expected on morning television. Robert's smile faltered slightly, but he quickly recovered, leaning back in his chair with an air of casual confidence. "Good morning, Joy," he replied smoothly, his voice carrying just a hint of curiosity about her opening. "I have to say, that's quite the warm welcome. Did I miss something? Or are we starting with the hard questions today?" The audience chuckled nervously, unsure of where this was heading. Joy's smirk widened. She had clearly been planning this moment, savoring the opportunity to put a major celebrity on the spot. "Oh, I think we both know why you're really here, Robert. This isn't just about promoting your latest project, is it? This is damage control." She leaned forward, her voice taking on that sharp edge that regular viewers knew all too well. "Let's talk about your past, shall we? The arrests, the drug problems, the rehabilitation. Do you really think you're the right person to be playing a hero for children?" The question hung in the air like a toxic cloud. The other co-hosts exchanged uncomfortable glances, clearly not expecting Joy to go this route so early in the interview. Whoopi shifted in her seat, looking like she wanted to intervene, but Joy wasn't finished. "I mean, seriously," she continued, "you've made some pretty questionable choices in your life. What makes you think parents want their kids looking up to someone with your history?" Robert's expression remained calm, but there was something shifting behind his eyes. The relaxed Hollywood charm was still there, but underneath it, you could sense a steel resolve forming. He took a slow breath, his fingers drumming once against the arm of his chair, before responding with remarkable composure. "You know, Joy," he said, his voice still warm, but with an undertone that suggested she should be very careful about where this conversation was heading. "I think there might be a misunderstanding here about what kind of conversation we're having today. When my publicist told me I'd be coming on The View, I was under the impression this was going to be a friendly chat about my work, maybe some laughs, the kind of thing your viewers tune in for." Joy wasn't backing down. If anything, she seemed energized by his measured response, interpreting it as weakness rather than the warning it actually was. "Oh, come on, Robert. You can't seriously expect to just waltz in here and pretend like your past doesn't matter. You were arrested multiple times. You went to prison. You had a serious drug problem that nearly destroyed your career and probably your life. And now you want to just gloss over all of that because you've made some successful movies?" The studio audience was completely silent now. This had gone far beyond uncomfortable and into something that felt almost cruel. Robert nodded slowly, as if he was processing not just her words, but the entire situation he found himself in. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, more thoughtful, but there was an unmistakable edge creeping in. "I see what's happening here," he said, looking directly at Joy with those piercing eyes that had commanded movie screens for decades. "You've decided that this is going to be some kind of gotcha moment, haven't you?" You think you can sit there and tear apart someone's lowest moments, their struggles with addiction, their mistakes, and somehow that makes for good television? Joy opened her mouth to respond, but Robert held up a hand, and something in his manner made her pause. "No, let me finish," he said, and now the friendly Hollywood actor was completely gone, replaced by someone who clearly had a lot more to say. "Because I think your viewers deserve to understand exactly what kind of conversation you've decided to have here today." The tension in the studio was thick enough to cut with a knife as Robert continued, his voice gaining strength and authority with every word. "You see, Joy, what you're doing right now isn't journalism. It isn't even entertainment. What you're doing is exploiting someone's personal struggles, their darkest moments. For what? A few viral clips? Some social media buzz? Is that really what The View has become under your influence?" Joy tried to interject, clearly realizing that she was losing control of the narrative she had tried to create. "Now wait just a minute, Robert. I'm asking legitimate questions that the public has a right to know about. You're a public figure, and your past behavior is fair game for discussion." Robert's laugh was soft but carried no warmth whatsoever. "Fair game? Is that what we're calling it?" He leaned forward now, matching her aggressive posture but with infinitely more grace. "Tell me something, Joy. When was the last time you sat across from someone and decided to ambush them with the most painful chapters of their life? When was the last time you thought it was appropriate to use someone's battle with addiction as entertainment for your audience?" The other co-hosts were frozen in their seats. Whoopi looked like she desperately wanted to change the subject, while Sarah and Alyssa seemed mesmerized by what was unfolding. The audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. This wasn't just a celebrity interview gone wrong. This was a masterclass in handling a hostile interviewer. "You want to talk about my arrests?" Robert continued, his voice now carrying the kind of commanding presence that had made him one of the highest-paid actors in the world. "Fine. Let's talk about them. Yes, I was arrested. Yes, I struggled with addiction. Yes, I made terrible choices that hurt people I cared about and nearly destroyed everything I had worked for. But here's what you seem to be missing in your rush to embarrass me on television." Joy's face was flushing now, and she was gripping her note card so tightly her knuckles were turning white. "Robert, I think you're being overly sensitive about some very reasonable questions." "Reasonable?" Robert's eyebrows shot up in genuine amazement. "Joy, let me explain something to you about what makes a question reasonable. A reasonable question might be, 'Robert, how did you turn your life around?' Or, 'What advice would you give to someone struggling with similar issues?' Or even, 'How do you want parents to talk to their children about making mistakes and learning from them?' Those are reasonable questions that serve your audience and create meaningful dialogue." He paused, letting that sink in before continuing with devastating precision. "What you've done instead is essentially ask me to relitigate the worst period of my life for your entertainment. You've taken someone's recovery journey, their struggle to become a better person, and tried to turn it into a weapon against them. And frankly, Joy, that says a lot more about you than it does about me." The studio was so quiet you could hear the cameras humming. Joy was clearly scrambling, trying to find a way to regain the upper hand in a conversation that had completely slipped away from her. "I think you're being unfair to my intentions here, Robert. The View has always been about having honest conversations about difficult topics." Robert nodded thoughtfully, as if he was genuinely considering her words. "Honest conversations about difficult topics. That's interesting. You know what would be an honest conversation about a difficult topic, Joy? Talking about how addiction affects families, discussing the challenges of recovery, exploring how society can better support people who are trying to turn their lives around. But that's not what happened here, is it?" His voice was calm, almost conversational now, which somehow made his words even more devastating. "What happened here is that you saw an opportunity to score points against someone you perceived as vulnerable, and you took it. You thought you could ambush me with my past mistakes and what, exactly? Make me cry? Make me defensive? Force me to apologize again for things I've already addressed and made amends for?" Joy was visibly uncomfortable now, shifting in her seat and looking around as if hoping one of her co-hosts would rescue her from the hole she had dug. "Robert, I really think you're mischaracterizing my approach here. I'm simply trying to have a candid discussion." "A candid discussion," Robert repeated, and now there was something almost pitying in his tone. "Joy, let me ask you something. How many other guests have you treated this way? How many other people have walked onto this stage expecting a professional interview and instead found themselves being attacked for their personal struggles? Because I have to tell you, if this is your idea of candid discussion, I think your viewers deserve better. The cameras caught every micro-expression on Joy's face as she realized she was being systematically dismantled by someone who was far more intelligent and articulate than she had anticipated. She had clearly expected him to either get defensive or to meekly accept her aggressive line of questioning. Instead, she found herself facing someone who was turning her own tactics against her with surgical precision. Furthermore, Robert continued, his voice gaining momentum, let's talk about the hypocrisy of what you're doing here. You sit on this show every day and talk about compassion, about understanding, about giving people second chances. You advocate for rehabilitation over punishment, for treating addiction as a health issue rather than a moral failing. But the moment you have someone sitting across from you who has actually lived through that journey, who has actually done the work of recovery and rebuilding, suddenly all of that compassion disappears. Joy tried once more to interrupt, but Robert was on a roll now, and his words carried the kind of authority that comes from someone who has not only survived their worst moments, but learned from them. You've essentially taken everything you claim to believe about redemption and recovery and thrown it out the window because you thought it would make for better television to try to humiliate me instead. The silence stretched on as Robert's words hung in the air, each one hitting its mark with devastating accuracy. Joy was now visibly flustered, her usual confidence completely shattered. She looked around the table desperately, but her co-hosts were transfixed by what they were witnessing. This wasn't just a celebrity pushing back against tough questions. This was a complete deconstruction of everything Joy had tried to accomplish with her ambush. But you know what the really sad part is, Joy? Robert continued, his voice now carrying a tone of genuine disappointment rather than anger. You had an opportunity here to have a meaningful conversation. You could have asked me about the work I do with various charities that help people struggling with addiction. You could have talked about the mentorship programs I support or the second chance initiatives I've been involved with. You could have explored how someone rebuilds their life after hitting rock bottom, which might actually help some of your viewers who are facing similar challenges. Joy's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. She was clearly trying to formulate some kind of response, some way to salvage the situation, but Robert wasn't finished with her yet. Instead, he said, leaning back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who had just delivered a masterclass in handling hostile interviewers, you chose to try to weaponize my recovery against me? And honestly, Joy, that's not just unprofessional, it's cruel. It's the kind of approach that keeps people from seeking help, that makes them afraid to be honest about their struggles, that perpetuates the stigma around addiction and mental health. The audience was completely captivated. You could see people in the front rows leaning forward, some nodding in agreement with Robert's words. This had become something far more powerful than anyone had expected, a genuine moment of truth on live television. Joy finally managed to find her voice, though it came out smaller and less assured than anyone had ever heard from her before. Robert, I think perhaps there's been a misunderstanding about the tone I was trying to set for this interview. Robert's smile was absolutely devastating in its politeness. Oh, I don't think there's been any misunderstanding at all, Joy. I think you were perfectly clear about your intentions. You wanted to embarrass me, to make me squirm, to score points with viewers who might enjoy watching someone get taken down a peg. The problem is, you picked the wrong target and you used the wrong ammunition. He stood up then, adjusting his jacket with the kind of smooth, practiced motion that reminded everyone exactly who they were dealing with. This wasn't just Robert Downey Jr., the recovering addict. This was Robert Downey Jr., the movie star, the man who had commanded hundreds of millions of dollars at the box office, the actor who had defined an entire generation of cinema. You see, Joy, I've been where you're trying to drag me today. I've been at my lowest point. I've been broken. I've been lost. But I've also done something that apparently you haven't quite grasped yet. I've learned from those experiences. I've grown. I've become someone better than I was before. And most importantly, I've learned to recognize when someone is trying to use my past against me, and I've learned how to handle it. Joy was now visibly trembling, whether from anger or embarrassment. It was impossible to tell. Robert, I really think you're overreacting to what was intended to be a straightforward interview. Straightforward, Robert repeated, and his laugh was genuinely amused now. Joy, let me give you a piece of advice that might serve you well in future interviews. When you decide to ambush someone, when you decide to try to humiliate them on live television, you better make sure you're prepared for them to fight back. And you better make sure you're better at it than they are. The cameras captured every detail as he delivered what would become the most talked about moment of the entire interview. Because here's what I've learned in my years in this business, in my years of recovery, in my years of rebuilding my life and my reputation. The people who try to tear others down, who try to use someone's worst moments against them, who think that someone's struggles make them weak or vulnerable, those people are usually the ones who are most afraid of having their own lives examined too closely. Joy's face went completely white. The implication was clear, and everyone in the studio understood exactly what Robert was suggesting without him having to say it explicitly. So before you decide to come for someone's recovery, before you try to shame someone for their past mistakes, before you attempt to use their honesty about their struggles as a weapon against them, maybe you should ask yourself what that approach says about you as a person and as a professional. He looked directly into the main camera now, speaking not to Joy, but to the millions of viewers watching at home. To anyone out there who's struggling with addiction, who's made mistakes, who's trying to rebuild their life, don't let people like this convince you that your past defines you. Your recovery matters, your growth matters, your second chance matters, and don't ever let anyone tell you otherwise. Then he turned back to Joy with that devastating smile that had charmed audiences for decades, but now carried an edge of absolute victory. Joy, it's been absolutely enlightening talking with you today. I think your viewers have learned a lot about the kind of person you really are, underneath all the talk about compassion and understanding. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to show them the difference between someone who talks about redemption and someone who actually lives it. The studio erupted in applause, but it wasn't the polite, scripted applause of a talk show audience. This was genuine, enthusiastic clapping from people who had just witnessed something extraordinary. Joy sat frozen in her chair, completely defeated, while her co-host looked between her and Robert with expressions of shock and admiration. As Robert made his way toward the exit, he paused and looked back one more time. Oh, and Joy? Next time you want to have a candid discussion about difficult topics, you might want to make sure you're prepared for the conversation to go both ways. With that, he walked off the stage, leaving Joy Behar sitting in stunned silence, thoroughly and completely humiliated on her own show. The audience was still applauding as the cameras faded to commercial, and everyone knew they had just witnessed television history in the making. What did you think of Robert Downey Jr.'s incredible response to Joy Behar's ambush interview? Have you ever seen a celebrity handle a hostile interviewer this masterfully? Let me know in the comments below what you thought about this epic takedown, and don't forget to subscribe for more incredible moments like this one. Until next time, remember that sometimes the best comeback is simply telling the truth.